Hello friends and welcome back. My name is Kat and I'm a filmmaker and journalist. As you're living your life, you get used to things, and these are little things that you might not even notice. For example, is it always light when you go to work? You always wear a coat. You know that when it gets to Christmas it's gonna snow, or not if you're in LA. What if you moved to a completely different place, like say Hong Kong? So here are a few things that I really wish I knew before I moved here. Number 1, your living habits that you're used to may need to be adjusted, or your expenses may increase. It's either or. I did talk about expenses in a previous video, but I think it's really important to highlight a few things that might affect your lifestyle here. Number 1, if you're into fitness stuff is a bit harder to find, especially within a certain budget. Oh, side note, don't go to GNC here. If you're from the States, don't go to GNC here because it is utterly overpriced. There are cheaper options, trust me. I'm into fitness stuff, so wherever I move to, I usually get a gym membership because, you know, gains. Whether it's New York, LA, London, you can find decent gym memberships for around $20-30 a month, sometimes even less. That's not the case in Hong Kong. The ones with decent equipment will probably come to around $80, and even then, they're not usually that big and they are usually very full. If you have extra money, then you will have more options, of course, but a lot more of the spacious ones, the ones with beautiful views, they will come at around $150. On the note of things that you're used to having in your life, I don't know if you're a bread eater or not, but there is this whole saying in my family: Chinese cannot live without rice and noodles, Russians cannot live without bread. And if you really want to enjoy bread, you want it to be soft and crunchy in all the right places. This will take a lot of searching. It's not easy to find good bread here, and that's very similar to my experiences when I stayed in mainland China, because a lot of the breads seem to have a bit of a sweet taste to them. As a kid, I remember visiting China and thinking, why is this bread kind of like a brioche? Not that I really knew what a brioche was at that age. Finding something like Warburtons seemed impossible. Kinda same story here. Of course, if you're happy to pay extra, you can buy sourdough bread. You might be thinking, I'm a chef, I can DIY this. Well, that takes me to my next point: home stuff. Be prepared that most apartments here will not have an oven, and that's because ovens aren't generally used in Asian cooking. At least not in Chinese cooking. So unless you're paying very high rent, you have a customized kitchen, or you have a previous owner who was very unique in his taste and changed the kitchen themselves, you'll probably not have an oven. You can buy a movable oven, one of those metal looking ones, or you could buy a toaster or an air fryer, which is what I did. It's not exactly the same, but it does do a lot of things quite similarly. I've loved having an air fryer. Yeah, it's been amazing. But beware, you will probably have quite limited counter space. So if you're getting one of those big chunky ovens, figure out whether or not you'll have space to store it first. Or be prepared to do a lot of Tetris work. Actually, that's not just the kitchen, that's probably your whole apartment. Drying your clothes, another home thing. In the UK, we hang our clothes everywhere. In the US, you'll probably have a tumble dryer. In Hong Kong, if you're lucky, your apartment will have a 2-in-1 washer and dryer. By the way, keep in mind that if you are using a washer dryer, 2-in-1 thing, you should half the load that you put into the dryer in comparison to what you put into the washer, because otherwise you will end up with kind of damp clothes coming out, and you will have to spread it around your small apartment to dry, and it will look like a dog just brought his friends over and had a party in your closet. If you don't have a 2-in-1 washer dryer because your landlord decided to go for the cheaper option, then you will probably have to get a drying rack of some sort. Ideally, pair a dehumidifier with it. Most dehumidifiers here will have a clothes drying option. If you get sunlight in your apartment, hang your clothes near the sunlight. If you don't, you're gonna have to rely on the dehumidifier. Otherwise, your clothes will just feel damp even after hanging for 12 hours. And yes, bedding is a huge pain to deal with. Probably better to send it off to laundromat, but I just can't quite bring myself to give something that I sleep in to someone else to handle. It just feels kind of unhygienic. But maybe that's just me. Who knows? Okay, bugs. Each separate place that you live in will probably have different sorts of bugs. What to expect in Hong Kong? Firstly, the obvious one, mosquitoes. But what I wish I knew was that it could be easily avoided. There are certain locations, especially places that are very close to the water with lots of trees. Those places will have a lot of mosquitoes, and maybe, I think they're called ticks. Maybe they're ticks because they're kind of smaller than mosquitoes. If you stand there with no bug spray, they can devour you. No, they will devour you. I wish someone told me just how many bites I would get on my journey up to Hong Kong University. I didn't know that there was a different way possible. And after that, I think I must have accumulated at least 100 mosquito bites, 50 on each leg. It was brutal. I felt like I was walking around with some contagious disease for 2 weeks. This sort of stuff always happens to me. It got so bad that sometimes when I was walking outside, I'd have to go into some convenience store just to stand around the AC so that it could cool down the irritation. I did find that wearing leggings actually helped because I guess the wind or the summer breeze didn't tickle the mosquito bites as much. This was my go-to anti-itch balm, which I still use to this day and I absolutely freaking love because it's simple, it does the job, and it's quite refreshing. You can also use it if you have migraines, headaches, you can rub it here, sometimes it helps. And if you feel nauseous, you can also rub it here, sometimes it helps. And after that terrible, traumatic experience going to the university, I very swiftly realized that I was not going to be able to handle walking through that passage. And then I found an alternative route, which was basically just going through the underground MTR as a walkthrough. And it worked great. You have AC, you are walking with no mosquitoes around you. So useful tip, using MTR entrances and the different exits that they have can help avoid the rain, the sun, hills, and mosquitoes. Another bug that you're going to be getting a lot of will be cockroaches. Now, of course, there is a way to handle this, but you need to know how. As spring comes around each year, you will see them everywhere on the streets. Yes, a lot, especially around restaurant areas or places that sell raw meats and seafoods. They are very brave. They're like London pigeons. They are not afraid of anybody because they know that they are super fast. You'll see squished ones on the street, which is just proof of how fearless they are. Scurrying around like the rats in New York, except you probably won't see that many squished rats in New York. What I learned from this was, number one, you must not wear flip-flops if you don't want cockroaches to be scurrying so close to your feet. And you must take out trash every day. If you don't, you have to at least tie it up or seal it in some way so that the smell does not go around. What I used to do in the previous place that I lived, I would tie up the trash, and if I still suspected that it might smell, I will spray around it with bug spray. No food should stay out. If you're getting something smelly like durian, you need to not leave any smell of it wafting around. Tie it up, seal it up, chuck it, because I do not want any risk of any infiltration of cockroaches, because once they enter, they will live as if they own your place without contributing to your rent, which is a no-no. So best just to avoid them from the very beginning. The weather and your skin. Oh boy, this is a long story, but I'm gonna try and make it as succinct as possible. The obvious one, sunscreen. If sunscreen/sun cream is not your best friend, it will become your best friend, because you cannot avoid the sun here. Oh, and you will sweat. Trust me, everyone's used to people turning up to meetings a little bit sweaty. Usually, if you want to turn up to a meeting non-sweaty, then you should account for some extra time for cooling down or get a candle. I'm not kidding. The weather can be quite temperamental. It flips between humid and dry. And the reason for that is because during the summer half of the year, it is so humid since we're surrounded by water. And then when it switches seasons or when it gets colder, basically means flipping back and forth. And I didn't really know this in the beginning, but then I bought a dehumidifier because of how humid it was. And I started noticing the difference in the percentage number. During the summer, a lot of the times it was between 70 and 85%. And then suddenly during a weather change, it can switch to below 50%. So that is definitely something that your skin will have to adjust to. Oh, and of course, if it does get below a certain temperature, you want to switch the heating on. And if you do, it gets really dry indoors. So what does this actually mean for your skin? Well, firstly, if you do wear any makeup at all, you may have to switch up your regime. It may be too thick for this weather. Same as with any tropical place, the usual BB cream or foundation will not cut it here. You may end up damaging your skin because it can't breathe when it's sandwiched between your sweat and the humidity. And if you're not used to tropical weather long term, you may end up getting things like eczema and rosacea, which you never thought you'd ever have. This is something that I have gone through. Definitely something that I wish I knew and I really didn't expect. My skin has been on a long journey to a whole other level. I grew up in the UK and I would say that the weather there is pretty mild. So my skin's a bit of a weather wuss. It was not made for tropical weather. I might even end up making a video about my skin issues that I've had in Hong Kong because it's definitely been an adjustment period and it has definitely been through a lot and many derm appointments. That pretty much sums up everything I have to say about the stuff that I really wish I knew about Hong Kong before moving here. Probably have left something out. If I have, or if you have any other questions, let me know. And remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this or if you're just feeling super nice. And I will see you next time. Bye!